Hey, what's up? So it's been asked in some online communities of late whether hiring people on staff and having dedicated resources is better than hiring an agency. And it's interesting the difference in people's opinions on how this works. And I just wanted to take a couple of minutes and explain. I mean, I have some very specific thoughts, and I've actually had this conversation with people in several different instances, and I wanted to go through and just kind of explain where my head is at on it and why I think one version is better than the other. But I think it really comes down to understanding the reality of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish. And the biggest thing is incentive. Who is incentivized to do what and why? Okay, so I put together a little presentation that I was using. To be honest with you, I was using this to try and sell a service. But I'm just not going to do the sales part of it. I'm just going to do the explanation, which is kind of the lead up to it. So what happens is when you go to hire an agency, there's a difference between what they promise you and the reality of what's actually going to happen. Normally, they'll promise that you're going to get access to more expertise. You're going to get access to a shorter learning curve because you don't have to teach someone or learn it yourself. The cost is going to be less because I mean, that's an overall cost. Usually the way that they promise that the cost is going to be less is by saying, well, instead of spending a bunch of money developing a resource, you can just get access to it right now. Speed of implementation, they'll talk about we can get you from 0 to done a lot sooner. And then you don't have to worry about managing, the person themselves. And then the big thing they talk about is that the leverage. You can leverage their expertise. But the reality is you may get access to their expertise, but because they have other clients, this is agencies, obviously, this is the agency promise. You have limited access to that expertise. There's still a learning curve involved because it's the learning curve that you have of working with that company. More often than not, in the same breath, agencies will tell you it's going to cost you less, and then they'll end up charging you more than you would pay for a dedicated resource. Normally, it's the promise is you're going to pay more now, but less over the long run. And the reality is you end up paying more now and over the long run. It's kind of what ends up happening. They talk a lot about speed of implementation, which actually is not what you really need. And that kind of ties back into the cost aspect. A lot of the sales pitch comes back to, oh, we can get this stuff done for you now. But what you really need isn't someone that's going to get a bunch of stuff done for you now. What you really need is a strategic partner that has the same incentives that you do. The HR question, I won't get into this too much, but if you've ever tried to manage an agency or manage an agency relationship, it's a lot of times worse than trying to manage an employee. And then the truth of leverage is that you're not actually leveraging them, they're leveraging you. And so let me talk to you about this for just a second. The reality is there are 3 different types of agency. Okay, the first is there's a retainer style agency where you pay a set monthly fee and you get access to services based on the level that you're paying. Now, what ends up happening, as you'll see here, you can see with the numbers here, and I'll use my mouse to kind of explain. Let's see here. Turn my pointer on here. So you can see here the return. The cost is this blue line here, which is set in the middle. Your return and your support goes like this. Initial return, usually you don't start to see a return until month 3 or month 4, right around here. And you still haven't made up what you've spent. There's still a big gap here. And then support, you can see, starts out great because you have access to them and you're a new client and they really love it. But right around the time where you start to see your return, where you start to break even and start to see a return, that's about the point where support starts to take a drop off. And the reason for that is because about this time, if the agency knows what they're doing, right around this point, they will have brought on another client, which they have to prioritize because that's new money. And we're going to talk a little bit more on that about incentive in a second, but this is the biggest problem right here is that there's a point, usually right after the point where you've started to break even on your investment, where the support goes way down. Okay. And then over time, because support goes down, your return starts to take a dip as well. And over time, if we were to extend this out several months into the future, you would see that support goes down to nothing, your return goes down to nothing. That's usually the point where you terminate that relationship. And like I said, usually you start out with a low return, you break even at a certain point, usually 2 or 3 months in, and then, like I said, you get to that point. The second style of agency is an event style agency. This is where you go out and work with them, or they come to your business and you work with them for a short period of time. And the promise is we're going to get a bunch of stuff done in a short period of time, and then you can just move forward from there. Well, the problem with this is that the numbers work out a little differently. So again, we got cost, which is represented by this here. You can see the massive upfront cost and then basically nothing ongoing, right? See that? Now the return, you'll see, I want to explain this a little bit because you can see there's this initial return, which is low. And then maybe month 3 or month 4, you start to see a return. And then there's this massive drop off here. And then support, you can see also, usually there's some support that will last beyond the initial engagement, but long-term, there's none. Here's the big problem with event style. If you don't get everything done at the event, this return curve looks a lot different. You don't get any return if you don't get everything done that you plan on doing. And the problem is I'll take that back. All of the times that I have ever been involved in this type of a thing, I have, for the sake as the agency involved, you could say, I have always tried to bite off more than I could chew because it puts me in a position where the client feels like more is going to get done. You always have to oversell in order to make that work. Because if you undersell what can happen, this cost right here doesn't seem all that like that good of an investment. But the problem is the agency will never explain to you this risk. They will never say, look, we can do all these things, but you got to understand, if we decide to do A, B, C, D, E, and we only get A, B, C done, you get zero return. Zero return. If you get A, B, C, D, E done, great. You can start to see a little bit of return in the short term, but over the long term, you don't need just a bunch of stuff done. You need support. You need ongoing help, right? So this doesn't actually help you in the long run. It may help you for short-term gains, but unless you do another event at this point and then use those gains, again, you have to make sure you hit everything. So it's kind of hard. And then obviously, blah, blah, blah. Now, the last style that I've seen becomes something more recent, which is outsourced style, which is super low cost, fixed monthly fee. And the idea is you get to essentially do like one thing at a time. So this is implementation agency or I forget what they call it. But the idea is they'll do anything for you, but you can only do one thing at a time. And true, you got a super low cost, but you're paying for what you're getting. Like the return, you're never really going to break through the return on that because there's not enough commitment from the resources that are doing what they need to do. And also, support is going to be terrible because the only way that they make money is by having a ton of clients. So the idea is, you can get some stuff done, and they're usually pretty good at it, but it's not actually meant for a return, right? The truth is, the agency business model is built on sales, not delivery. Agencies don't make money delivering services. In fact, if you think about it, agencies lose money the minute they start delivering their service. They make money by selling you on what they're going to do, and then the second anybody does anything, they start losing money. So they're incentivized to do as little as possible for you. And it's not that they're trying to do as little as possible, it's just that they're financially incentivized to do as little as possible and charge you as much as possible. That's the way they make money. They also have a financial imperative to put the bulk of their focus on new business as opposed to existing business. They have to do that again because the way that they make money is by bringing on new business, and so there's almost a natural churn built into the agency model because at some point there will be enough new clients brought on that where you don't get any support, so you end up leaving. But they have to build that into their process because if they don't, and you and maybe one or two other clients are their only clients, if you leave for any reason, or if you can't pay or don't pay for any reason, their business gets shut down. And in order for them to pay their employees, to pay themselves, to feed their families, they have to focus on where money comes from, which is new business. Okay, so again, this is about incentive. It's not that they're trying to manipulate you or do anything bad. It's that in order for them to pay their bills and feed their families, they have to focus on new business, prioritize that over existing business. They just have to. And then the last thing is that this isn't actually the last thing, but another thing is they leverage through the cost. Like again, I mean, there's no magic bullet anywhere that says that somehow by having a bunch of clients, you make more money, or somehow by hiring somebody else and they have 2 or 3 other clients that they're working with, that everybody like wins. The truth is, at the end of the day, it's all about the amount of energy put in and the amount of cost that comes out, and is it worth it? And the way that they leverage themselves to build the lifestyle that they want, so that they can continue to manage their business and not have to burn themselves out by working too hard for too many people. They have to leverage you by charging you more, right? That's pretty obvious. You're going to pay more for an agency because they're going to have expertise, but they're leveraging you in order to pay their own bills. And then the last thing is that no matter what they say, no matter what agencies tell you, the only way that they scale their business and grow their business is by sharing resources, throwing their resources amongst you and other clients. So you are never ever going to have exclusive access to anyone. That you can't do that. There are some agencies that have kind of worked around it by creating, like having a dedicated resource that they hire specifically for you. But the problem is, those resources predominantly are account management resources and not expertise resources. And so it's very, very difficult to have a setup where you're actually getting exclusive access to some type of expert, because they, as the agency, they can't afford to do that for you. Like, they can't afford to take their A players and restrict them only to you, because that's just they're just a talent agency at that point. And that's not what they're in the business to do. So they're not incentivized to give you that level of access, because it hurts their bottom line, right? Now, the biggest problem with hiring any type of agency, and I'm talking about myself as well, like this is, and again, I have to say this 1,000 times, it's not that agencies they're out to get you. It's that they are financially incentivized to behave in this way, and there's no other way to do it. So dealing with an agency, this is just like, it's a problem for them too, because they have to come up with a way to get around the fact that this is the case. The biggest problem is that if it comes down to it, if it came down to a choice between serving your interests versus serving their interests, they will always choose their own. And they have to. This is one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand, is that they have to choose their own interests over yours, because that's how they pay their bills. That's how they feed their families, right? At the end of the day, if you get to a situation, like I said before, if they get to a situation where they've got 12 clients, they want to bring on a 13th, and you're the first one that they brought on, if the 13th client is going to represent more revenue and less work to them, they will fire you, because it means it's a better decision for them in their business. Like, their incentive is not aligned with yours, because they have their own goals and what they're trying to achieve. And the same thing, by the way, is true with freelancers. Like, they are financially incentivized. They have to think about themselves before they think about you. And that's the difference, I think, between hiring employees and hiring agencies or freelancers, is that because it's so difficult to align the financial incentive and align, really the goals and like what you're trying to achieve, it becomes very, very difficult to get into a relationship with an agency where you don't always feel sort of on the edge, on the precipice of losing something, right? So, again, it's not that dealing with agencies is bad or wrong or you shouldn't do it. It's that anytime you deal with any agency ever, these are the things you have to deal with. And depending on what the style of agency they are, there will be different issues that you got to deal with. But the truth is, it's not in your best interest to work with an agency long term. The thing that's in your best interest is just to hire someone and pay them what they're worth. Get someone that's good, that knows what they're doing, and pay them what they're worth. That's pretty much all there is to it.